G'day, g'day, how you going? What do you know? Don't strike a light. G'day, g'day, and how you going? Just say g'day, 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 and you'll be right.
Now we come to the portion of the service before we do our Bible study that we address some end times news and trends that are happening around the world as it relates to Bible prophecy. There's a couple items I do want to focus on. One that will take the remainder part, but again, we always want to see what's happening in Israel. There's an interesting article that came up out of the Times of Israel, and the defense minister, Lieberman, he mentioned this, that we're closer than ever to deal with the Palestinians. So this agreement with the Palestinians is an opportunity for a full relation with the Arab states that would sway Netanyahu's government to accept a deal. He goes on to say that we're far closer to an agreement than ever before. He said in a news interview on Channel 2 on Thursday, and he says, we hope to be able to fully realize this option. Lieberman didn't offer any details about the agreement that's on the table, referring to it's only an arrangement, but indicated U.S. President Donald Trump's administration had played a huge role in mending the pact together, and that would include other regional players. When asked about the deal, how it would come together, Lieberman responded, because Trump has arrived onto the scene, and because, as I keep saying, the Arab countries have internalized that their problem is not Israel, Israel can be a solution to the problem. He goes on to say, if someone comes and puts a deal on the table that includes an agreement with all the moderate Arab states, including the open of embassies, trade relations, direct flights, I believe that it will get an overwhelming majority in the Knesset amongst the people, he mentioned in the article. The article goes on to say that Trump has been pushing Israel and the Palestinians to resume talks, peace talks that indicate that he would like to help both sides reach the ultimate deal. Trump has wrapped up his visit last month to Israel, and senior officials said that the U.S. would be working on building strong relationships with the Middle East between Israel and the Arab neighbors, and would create momentum in this peace deal. Many of the Gulf Arab states, by the way, and the Palestinians, they continue to support the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which sets a peace deal with the Palestinians in preconditions for the opening ties between Israel and the wider Arab world. This peace deal, again, it's getting closer and closer, as we mentioned, almost on a weekly basis, and it's setting up for that eventual deal that will happen where the Antichrist will eventually seal it. Now, do keep in mind, the Antichrist doesn't have to be a part of this deal and making it and negotiating it. He needs to confirm it and reaffirm it, is what more of what's taken place in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, where he's agreeing to this thing and reinforcing it. Doesn't mean that those who are negotiating this deal right now is the Antichrist. Trump is not the Antichrist. Netanyahu or Abbas, they're not the Antichrist, okay? So this agreement will be in place at some point. The Antichrist will come and reaffirm that. So we're getting closer and closer, and part of that, as we mentioned before, will have to be the agreement of the ability for the Jews to rebuild their temple. That has to be in place. And again, it doesn't take that long to build this particular temple, but it has to be in place during the tribulation period, because we know the Antichrist, after 3.5 years, he will come in and desecrate the temple. So this is something that we just need to keep a pulse on what's happening. We know we're getting closer and closer to this period of time. Now, on an issue of religion, deception, etc., and it's something that I think so many people are confronted with on a regular basis, is that of the issue of Islam. There's an interesting billboard, and I'm going to use this as a segue to get into some of the other components of Islam. There was a billboard in Indianapolis, and it said, "The Perfect Man." And it gave 6 bullet points of the life of Mohammed. For example, he married a 6-year-old girl. He was a slave owner, trade dealer, a rapist, beheaded 600 Jews in one day, 13 wives, 11 at a time, tortured and killed unbelievers. So this is what Muhammad is in his life. So if people study the life of Muhammad, you'd want to leave Islam, not join Islam. But anyways, this billboard was put up there. There's a man that Farar Qatari, he said he was disappointed, and he's part of the Islamic Society of North America. And he says, we do support free speech, but we do realize this is rooted in bigotry, even though that what was on the billboard is fact, but it's bigotry. Anyways, they're said that the Muslim Alliance of Indiana plans to raise money to put its own billboard up there to have a message of peace and kindness, which is kind of doesn't make sense when you're dealing with Islam. Islam, by the way, doesn't have any peace in it. It's submission. That's what Islam means. Going off of that, there's an article that came out in an interview this past week on Fox News that talked about Muslim safe space here in Australia. And it's actually taking place here in Melbourne, as where this is heading toward. There's a group here in Victoria called Islamic Counsel of Victoria, ICV, that it wants to create these safe spaces for young Muslims to discuss inflammatory issues, and of course it sparked a lot of commotion. The Islamic Counsel of Victoria said such forums enable young people's opinions to be respectfully, intelligently, and debated and challenged. So what they're proposing through this safe space here is where people can sit around and rant hate speech. The notion that you can safely, without being monitored and without being picked up by authorities, trying to be involved in these radicalization is what's taken place, where the police would be monitoring and keeping a pulse of what's happening. So they're wanting to have these places around, which, again, what's not safe about your mosque or your homes? Why do you need another separate place in the community? This ICV, which represents some 200,000 Muslims here in Victoria. And by the way, here in Endeavour Hills, there's over 10% that are of the population are Muslim. Dandenong's a whole nother issue. It's like you're in the Middle East when you're in Dandenong these days, which wasn't like this, 10, 20 years ago. But we're seeing such an infiltration of these Muslims around. And so the community, as the article says, they're suffering mental health and other problems because of widespread suspicion it faces. So there's a lot of suspicion because of so much terrorist attacks are going on. Again, as we mentioned, Ramadan's going on right now. Just in the last 12 days, there have been 60 terror attacks, different magnitudes. You're only seeing some of the big stuff that's catching the news. There's a bunch of stuff that's behind the scenes that no one's seen, but carried out all in the name of Allah or Islamic extremism, resulting so far, what they calculated, 832 people dead and injuring 912, which has already surpassed last year's numbers. So it's almost doubled in numbers with the deaths. Last year there was 421 deaths during Ramadan. We're only 12 days into this thing so far. So see what the next month and installs with this. Now, and this is the final article that I want to share with you. It was a lawyer. His name's Jay Sekulow, and it's called the ACLJ.org. And he wrote this great article that really kind of put some bullet points when talking to people about the Islamic terror attacks. And he says 4 things that you need to know about Islamic terror. And he goes on to talk about this battle for the souls of Western civilization. The enemies of this war are Islamic, radical Islamic jihadists who are accommodating the religion of Islam in their violent quest for world domination. They're very open about this, okay? And we see how so many Muslims are now invading cities and communities and taking over. There's a city in Deerfield, Michigan, and you've probably heard about it, how now it's predominantly Muslim, and they've implemented Sharia law. There's cities here in Victoria that they're trying to put Sharia law in. But anyways, without taking the terrorism aspect out of it, when Muslims exist in large numbers in a community, whether it's here or in America, and this particular article talks about, where they take over the whole city, there's these blocks of calls to prayer. As you know, they're 5 times a day, they have these prayers. They put it on these loudspeakers so everyone hears it. Why? Because they want to move the non-believers out and eventually take over, and it's that call to submission. It's not a call to peace. So eventually you'll get sick of it and people move out and they'll eventually take over the city. So that is part of the goal. Anyways, while certainly the majority of Muslims are nice people, peace, loving is what they would like to be called, people who disapprove of the tactics of Islamic terrorism, the basis of war, which we find ourselves very much about, it's about religion. And there's 4 things to know about this Islamic threat. Number 1, the ideology rooted in a political system is no concept of separation of religion and civil government, of what we would typically call the separation of church and state. That doesn't happen under Sharia law. Sharia law is not just a religious law. Even today, the numerous of Muslim countries, and again, you see so many people leaving those countries where there is Sharia law. If you like it so much, go back there and live under it. It's a horrible regime to live under. But Sharia comes from the Prophet Muhammad. He was both a religious figure and also a political ruler. And so the concept of religious law and civil law being one and the same is foundational in the Islamic tradition. The second point that you need to understand is there is a theology behind the ideology. The elements of the theological thinking to influence the geopolitical stance of Islamic are based in the Quran. So as you go through the Quran, there's dozens and dozens of verses that talk about this terrorism act that's part of being a good, obedient Muslim. And so they're very strict and they're very literal word for word, the words of Allah here. Connected with strong religious convictions is the unifying idea that Islamic is that there's quite literally one true faith, and that is Islam. There is only one supreme law, and that is Sharia law. There can be no compromise, no acceptance of any other way. It's not a matter of religious life versus civic life. These two are inseparable. Religion and government are never separated according to the Quran. Sharia law applies to all people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. So some of the key elements of Sharia law, and it covers all these different aspects of life, the overarching exegetical rule is abrogation. This means that the verses that came later on in the Quran supersede those that were earlier on. So, for example, the moderate piece of the early parts of the Quran, the Meccan period is more of a moderate time. The later parts of the Quran is the more of the violent, and this is the Medina period of Muhammad's life. Some aspects of the Sharia law include adultery as a capital offense, gender equality, again, as the Quran prescribes female genital mutilation. And in fact, when you go into a lot of the Muslim communities, you see this is a major problem there. The testimony of a woman before a judge is only half that of a man. A woman cannot leave the home unaccompanied by a male relative. Men are given permission to use corporal punishment on their wives. Jihad is to be used to spread the faith. Man can marry up to 4 wives of any faith or background, of any age, including young girls. Again, Muhammad's last wife was 9 years old when he married and consummated the relationship. Women can only have one husband, and he must be a Muslim. And additionally, the blasphemy is saying anything that's offensive about Islam. So even talking about the facts of Islam is considered blasphemy. Any system of man-made laws is considered illicit or inferior to Sharia law. Allah has already provided all the laws that humanity needs. The third tenet of Islamism is the belief the whole world must be eventually Muslim. This is the caliphate that we've mentioned time and again. So they have this idea that they want to rule over and take over. Whether jihad is militarized, remains merely descriptive of the energetic force of the spread of faith. The theological foundation of Islam's evangelistic goals is based on the legitimacy versus illegitimacy. All other religions and all other judicial systems are wrong. Islamic doctrine is true, and this is what they're wanting to push forward. And this is where governments are bowing down to Islam. This is why this is such an important thing for us to understand and what's going on here in Australia and around the world. The basis of their violence and unrestrained killing is that perpetual by all the Islamic terror groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, or individuals who carry out vicious attacks like London and Manchester and Orlando and San Bernardino and other places like that. The idea for all faithful Muslims, based on the Quran, is a world where everyone is Muslim. And this implies to the conversion or death of everyone else in the world. Okay, this is their ideology. This is their goal. And while it's a doctrine open to interpretation by moderate and radical or reformed Muslim, it's not an optional doctrine or theological tenet. The end of the age, according to the mainstream Islamic teaching, is that there will be the golden age of Islam, where the only religion left is on the planet that is Muslim. And then finally, there is no restraints or laws of war according to Islam. Again, they have the idea the end justify the means. Historically, what we call the just war theory maintains that wars can be justified. The conflict conducted from the right human wrong to liberate territory illegally seized, to protect innocent life, and so forth. So there's a just war is what's been called. Proportionally, just the keys of the tenet of just war. Many of the wars and hostilities end with treaties or compromises with land being surrendered. You can negotiate the end of wars, typically. Now, how do you negotiate with someone whose goal is to kill you? That's their goal in mind. Unless you convert to Islam, they want to wipe you out and kill you. No amount of appeasement or negotiation will end the global war on Islamic terror. So having a conversation with these terrorists is not going to solve it. Telling them to stop doing this is not going to solve it. They're going to continue, and they're going to ramp up more of their attacks in these end times. While Al-Qaeda called for the removal of the infidels from Muslim lands, the elimination of Jews from Palestine, ISIS takes the fight to a whole new level. And so the fight to the death is for all who are not Muslims. So every Muslim war according to them. This is their ideology. The rules of war do not apply to them. This is not about liberation or righting a human wrong. It's about the right of a cosmic wrong. Justice will be achieved when all living beings declare that Allah is one and Muhammad is his prophet. This is the goal of Islam. In his declaring a statement and establishment of the caliphate, ISIS leader al-Baghdadi, he said this, quote, "To kill Americans and their allies, both civil and military, is the individual duty of every Muslim who is able in any country where it's possible," end quote. So this is the threat we face here in Australia. It's a threat that people face around the world. And so it's important that we know what's going on. It's important to know the ideology behind this. The media and the politicians do not want to call it what it is. They're afraid of it because, oh, you're intolerant for telling us the facts. You're intolerant for saying that it's Islam. They don't want to offend anyone. But as we see, this is going to be an ongoing problem every single day, every single week, every month, every year. As this worldview of this battle is continuing, and it's going to get more intense in these last days. So we need to get informed, we need to stay informed, and create conversations with people about this, opportunities to witness to people, to share the truth of the Bible and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and may this motivate us to, get out there and make a difference in our world, sharing the love of Christ, even with these Muslims, and having conversations with them, even though they might disagree with you, but you have a conversation with them about some of these things. And may we serve and witness and be the salt and light that he's called us to be, and may we show the love and grace and compassion towards others. And so people are watching us as believers. Amen? And that concludes today's update.